What if Rihanna never left Barbados? What if Bob Marley never had any funding studios or distribution deals from Jamaica? Why are our greatest talents forced to grow beyond the Caribbean in order to get big? Caribbean governments say they want innovation, but ignore the multi-billion-dollar gold mine right under their nose, and that is the creative industry. Stick around and find out. Hi, this is Carrie Heron, and I am speaker, content queen, and consultant to governments, to companies, and to leaders. And we're going to be talking about why the companies and governments in the Caribbean and other small states need to invest heavily in the creative industries to boost economic beyond tourism. All right, so let us talk about this. We're talking about YouTubers, podcasters, we're talking about film producers, we're talking about animators, fashion designers, storytellers, digital cultural builders. We're talking about everybody in movie and film, anything in the creative industries, even talking about food. Because here's the truth, tourism is seasonal, content is scalable, culture is forever. How are we going to leverage all of that? We're now living in a world where influence, storytelling, and visibility are shaping global commerce, policy, and perception. And the Caribbean has the talent, has got the stories, and the global appeal. But what we're missing is the infrastructure, the investment, and intentionality. So tourism will give us a season, but creative industries will give us legacy. So it's time to look beyond the sun, sand, and the sea for Caribbean governments. So the creative economy in the global sphere is booming. When I say booming, I mean that the global sector, creative sector economy is valued at 250 plus billion today and projected to reach 480 billion by 2027. Let me just do that again. 250 plus billion today and projected to reach 480 billion by 2027. That's according to Goldman Sachs. So, what I'm saying is that in 2 years from today, it is projected to almost double. Let that sink in for a second. India's AV CG sector, the animation, visual effects, and gaming and comics, is growing at a rate of 16 to 18% CAGR, now worth $3.5 billion, with government-led accelerators in multiple states. Nollywood in Nigeria, that's the second largest film industry in the world, worth 6.4 billion, employing over 1 million people. South Korea's KOCCA drives exports in music, hey K-pop, drama, games, and film. 12.4 billion in cultural exports in 2021 alone. Dubai's creative economy the Dubai's creative economy strategy is building the Middle East's biggest creator hub, aiming to attract 140,000 creatives by 2025. The trend is clear. Nations that invest in creators win. And having lived in Dubai for 7 years, there's so many things to make it easier for freelancers, filmmakers, creatives to actually move to Dubai, to work in Dubai, to get freelance licenses, freelance visas without having to develop to rely on another investor. So they're making and putting policies in place so that people will be able to, they can source the right people can go there and be able to be accessed by the productions that are going to be going on. And recently in Dubai, there was an announcement of a merger between OSN and Warner Brothers in Dubai. So that's big things coming up as well in that regard. Now, let's talk about the Caribbean potential versus current reality. Despite global demand for Caribbean culture, the creative industry in the Caribbean contributes only 2 to 5% of GDP, while tourism dominates up to 30 to 40%. And it's not because Caribbean creatives are not working hard. It's not because Caribbean creatives are not exporting, are not putting out the products. It's for other reasons. There are 0 Caribbean-based creator platforms with international traction. Very few creators receive local funding, distribution, or export support. To get funding for creative projects in the Caribbean is like pulling teeth without Novocaine. It cannot continue if the Caribbean should ever get a piece of that pie in the sky, right? So what does this mean? It means that we have to rethink the way that we're doing things. The diaspora demand is massive across the world, the region, the Caribbean diaspora, as well as people who just love the Caribbean, not even from the diaspora. There is a massive demand for all things colorful and Caribbean, but there's no streamlined pipeline to turn Caribbean culture into high yield digital exports. What does that mean? Opportunity sounding like cash being thrown into nowhere. Creators are burning out. As I said, the lack of output, lack of them contributing to the GDP has nothing to do with them not working. It has to do with them working 7, 8, 10 times, 20 times as hard to move a needle than it really needs to be moved. And so they're doing so much more and getting so little back in return. It's kind of foolish for creators at this rate in these economic times to actually invest because there is no support. And they're burning out and they're leaving the region, including their IP. So not only are they leaving the region, but their IP, their intellectual property, and that's where the money is. And countries are forfeiting billions in cultural capital. So why does a podcaster in Jamaica have to depend on a US grant to tell a Caribbean story? Why does a podcaster in the Dutch Antilles get way less than a podcaster in Holland in funding to tell stories? Because the investment is not there for us, by us. So let's talk about recession in the global north and what could that mean for us? Is there an opportunity there for Caribbean governments? Is there an opportunity there for Caribbean companies? Is there an opportunity there for Caribbean creators? The US saw a 30% drop in VC funding in 2023. Canada's growth forecast has slowed by 1.2%. That's according to the IMF in 2025. Cultural budgets are being slashed across Europe due to inflation. Creators are relocating from expensive, saturated markets to emerging, affordable, culturally rich locations. Enter the Caribbean. But are we really ready to receive them? Do we even have visas? Do we have remote work visas? How are we even viewing people, creators coming in to create content? Do we think that they're going to rob money from the region? Or do we recognize that they could actually be bringing money into the region? We have to really think about and rethink about how we look at the creative industries. So let us next look at the cutting. So while the West cuts creative funding, actually the Caribbean really should position itself to become a magnet for global creators, but first to support our homegrown creators. And this includes a mixture of both government policy as well as corporate investors. There's no reason why producers of content like myself, I have a top ranking podcast that was ranked on Apple Podcasts within 30 days, why we're struggling to get corporate sponsorship for programming that is going to help us to reach new audiences is kind of like puzzling. I'm still perplexed as to why so many people are not seeing the opportunities here. And unfortunately, the problem is that if we don't get into it before, then others are going to come in and going to reap the. So, why are bank sponsors and telcos, why do y'all need to fund creators in the Caribbean? Because banks and brands don't just fund content, they invest in future economies. So, like, if you're a banker and you're hearing that there's $250 billion today in the creative economies, and that's projected to double to 480, yes, that's 20 billion short of complete double by in 2 years' time, 24 months' time, then why would you not be like, dude, like if you compare that to real estate, there's nothing else that's going to give you a greater return on any investment. So that's why it makes sense. It makes sense financially. Harvard Business Review says that aligning with cultural content increases brand value up to 40%. So when you're looking at your campaigns and you are only looking at it from a very rigid perspective, perhaps the thing to do is to align with creators who will humanize your brand. Yeah? And allow you to cross gaps, cross over into new regions, new opportunities, new income streams perhaps. Telcos need to gain new customer pipelines through sponsored content and IP partnerships. We're talking about OTT, over the line, top of the line, user generated pull content like Netflix, Prime, Amazon Prime, and Hulu, etc. We need those things in the region. We also need our content to be able to compete with those that are already there as well. We need to be able to increase our production value through equipment and all of these really intensive things, because video production, content production is costly. It has an investment upfront. We need to have branded docuseries or video podcasts. And if you think about those things, those build long-term audience trust, and especially among Gen Z and millennials. So aligning with these things is going to help you to connect to newer, younger generations of your customers, getting them to start early and to stay in your pipeline for a longer time. Yes, it's actually beneficial for you to do so. I don't know what happened where there was a cross between, there's a line when marketers used to go after productions, used to go after the creative projects to be able to invest in them. And somehow sponsors felt like, well, we have the money, you have to beg and you have to do this and you have to do all sorts of really weird things and jump through hoops in order to get our money. But I believe that the value proposition is a mutually beneficial one. So creatives and creators need the financial backing and the funding of companies and governments, but likewise, those who are in the business of making money and making profits actually need, one, the audience that's generated with creatives, two, the community that creatives are able to generate through those audiences, three, the return on income by having those warm lead gen people associated with your brand. It's a win-win for everyone. It's not something where somebody needs to beg somebody else for investment. So here are 10 policies that governments must adopt No. From my perspective, as one who has been in the creative industries for nearly 30 years, on account of having started really early in my teens. Yes, I'm a millennial with 30 years of experience because I've been in this thing for a long time in multiple countries. 5 countries in 2 hemispheres, and actually 6, not 5 anymore. So here are 10 things that need to be put in place right now. One, governments, 5K to 5K to 25K startup grants for new creators. Yep. Incentivize new creators to go into projects, giving them startup grants amounting from 5,000 to 25,000. Of course, you'll have to go through processes where they'll be, scrutinized and so on and so forth. There are ways to do this. Other countries have done it just fine. We just need to be able to do it. So 5,000 to 25,000, even up to 30,000 creator accelerator programs also are what need to be included. And these are going to be inspired by South Korea and India. They have their national creator accelerator programs. And that means that you can take, not just give grant funding, but help to bring and the creator and advance them in their journey to accelerate them, like an incubator, but for creators. Absolutely wonderful. Matching them even with potential investors as well. So number 3, export and translation incentives for international distribution. So this cannot be minimized. Export and translation incentives for international distribution. We are not only speaking one language across the region. Across the Caribbean region, there are many languages spoken. There's English, of course, there's Spanish, there's French, there's Creole. There's also different dialects in the different countries as well. So we have multiple languages represented among us, but there are very few countries in which many of these languages many of the languages would be spoken in one place. And one of those places is Aruba. Aruba speaks 4 different languages. That's English, Dutch, Spanish, and Papiamento, as does Curacao, or Corso as it's spoken in the Netherlands Antilles. So, and Bonaire. So the ABC Islands are the only ones that speak Papiamento, but the people from the ABC Islands are much more likely to be polyglots, that is speakers who speak 4 or more languages. However, across the rest of the Caribbean, it's more likely that you'll have countries speaking one language. So we can't even really talk to each other. So we have to be able to invest in the capacity to translate so that we're able to reach markets within the Caribbean. And once we're able to reach more markets within the Caribbean, then that also exposes us to much more outside of the Caribbean as well. So investing in export and translation incentives for international distribution is a critical part of boosting the economy, the creative economies in the Caribbean. Governments, listen up. Here is this thing that frustrates me beyond measure. Tax exemption up to 100K for creators. Perhaps even more than 100K. Why? Because the equipment costs. Equipment costs incredibly, and equipment isn't the only cost. But the point of the matter is that if you give people an incentive, maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe more than 100,000, maybe 200,000, right? So that smaller creators can come on board and get huge incentives to start. Once you lower the barrier for entry, you're going to have more people coming on board. And remember that Caribbean businesses often are undercapitalized in the first place, or GDP is not really as high as it really could be. So we have to lower the bar to entry so that more people can get a leg up, just to be able to stand in order to compete. Because what's happening is that we have, and I've seen it as a producer, I've been producing for television since I was 19 years old. And I would go to different places across Jamaica back then. And I worked on shoots like Hill and Gully Ride as well as Entertainment Report. And Entertainment Report is still running. And one of the things that I noticed was just how incredibly talented the people were. And they're people from different places, people from really, really very poor places, people from remote country places as well. Extremely talented, but what they were lacking was the opportunities. The most talented people are often from the hardest places because they've had to transcend hard things to, in order and be extremely creative to come out of and to bloom in deserts. But they still need support, and they need more support than others. And without that, then they're not going to be able to compete. So you need to give the smaller creators a better chance. Give grant funding, and you can't give grant funding and then also come around and tax for equipment that they're going to be invested the grant funding in, because that doesn't make any sense. So grant funding paired with tax incentives are going to be huge, huge, huge in getting this. It doesn't make sense for you to tax somebody 20% on $10. Wait until the person can make $2 million and then tax 2%, and you're still going to be making a lot more. But that person's also going to be able to impact a lot more people in the process. You want businesses to survive and to thrive. Businesses are not opposing, are not they're not there just to suck people dry. If anybody is willing to make his or own work and to create work for others should be incentivized, especially if they are doing it without capital. We have to make it easier. So we also need to have national creator awards sponsored by ministries, really highlighting people, rewarding people for their work. I grew up in the creative industries when the majority of creatives made no money. There are people who are talent, who you see in the news every night, who are known household names and the best of their industries, who worked with the BBC and across the world as correspondents, and who do not own a home, who do not have any real financial safety net. That cannot continue. That's why you have the IP drain and the brain drain. We have to be able to recognize people, and doing so in awards ceremonies, just like how you have the Oscars and the Grammys and the Golden Globes and all of the BAFTA and whatever. We need to have our own across the region to celebrate the talent. Nollywood has it, Bollywood has it. We need to celebrate. And then even with those things, and we will also have a place for the creatives who are set designers, the creatives who are also fashion designers, to show off all of their designs and stuff with the people who are wearing their things. It's just a win-win. It's just a win-win. I know so many Filipino designers in Dubai who are doing exceptionally well, designers from the Philippines, and they're clothing people like J-Lo, people like Janet Jackson, people from all of the top stars, because their governments also look at things a lot differently, and they're also able to leave from the Philippines and go to Dubai, where their policies allow creatives to really get tapped into money, as well as to the management systems that actually are allowing them to use their creativity and multiply for serious financial benefit. I'm talking about people like Michael Cinco, who's my friend, Ezra Santos, who's my friend, Angela Estera, beautiful designers who are doing phenomenal work in the UAE, and not only in the UAE and beyond, but originating from the Philippines island as well. All right. So let us talk about more things. Number 8, public-private creator partnerships for funding IP. So we need public-private creator partnerships. We need to be able to put the people in place, the creative in place with the funding and the policy, so that we can have creative ways of funding for the IP. We also need to have legal aid, legal help. We need to have IP protections. I know that Jamaica does have some IP protections. You can register your IP, which is phenomenal. Other Caribbean states need to do that as well. So you have IP protections, and free copyright tools for creators is a must, because ownership is where the money is, and we need to be able to protect our creative ownership in our IP. We also need to have more university curricula for creator economy careers. And I'm so blessed that I was able to actually go to the University of the West Indies, and I studied up to the graduate level in media and communications. And I also studied at the Creative Production and Training Center, now called MTI in Jamaica, the largest English-speaking production house. And that's where I actually got my first training as a television presenter in Jamaica, because getting the right training makes a huge difference. We need to have these systems across. Now, that school that I was telling you about, the Caribbean Institute of Media and Communications, CARIMAC, operating out of the University of the West Indies, does take in intake of students from across the region. And so more students could look into going to CARIMAC in order to really honing in on skills that are going to be profitable. But I want to see film return back to the University of the West Indies. It used to be before, but it is extremely expensive to fund a film school if it is that we don't have the right partnership. So we need the government input. We also need more Caribbean countries to come together in order to fund it at the University of the West Indies. These are conversations that need to have, but not only conversations, these are actions that need to be taken, and need to be taken rather swiftly for us to make a really dent in that pie. It's $250 billion in 2025, expected to grow to $480 billion in 2027. So we need to act really quickly. All right. So let us look into this thing. Let us get things ordered. If you are government and you're looking for ideas, looking for the right consultants to work with, let me know. We've got teams to work with you. I actually went to Turks and Caicos Islands about 20 years ago, almost 18 years ago, to develop a public relations unit for the Turks and Caicos Islands government. I've consulted with governments, and I have worked with the government of the UAE, particularly Ras Al Khaimah, in the funding, in the marketing of the state of Ras Al Khaimah and the free zone of Ras Al Khaimah as a place for international businesses to come in and get businesses, to get licenses to do business within the country. And these are some of the things that need to happen. So let's get into it. Caribbean governments, let's talk. Let's not only talk, let's put measures in place, let's put strategies in place, and let us help our people to make the money that they can make, but they only need your help to do so. Again, I'm Carrie Heron. Thank you for watching, and I think that you should share this to every person in government you know. Keep on sharing this, because it's our time, but we've got to make certain that we make the right moves and make them swiftly. See you in the next video. Walk good.